Now Micah Miller trying to spring a pass ahead. Nobody in front of Jack Pavlich. Moves on with a blast and scores! Jack Pavlich with an
We aren't giving up on chances, and we just got to bottom line execute.
Waits, passes in front. Great save, Pavlich, as she robs a gopher in front of her, and that was number 8, Kippen Keller, on the grade A opportunity.
For me as a coach, that's the kind of D you're always looking for, because they don't grow on trees for sure, and he's done a really good job being a captain of a really young team this year.
It was a really cool thing to see for them to really appreciate what I've done on and off the ice.
to the far half wall. Jack Pavlich trying to play it into the corner. Now Pavlich turns, squares his body to the slot, sends it up high toward Jack. A shot makes its way through, and they score! Right along the blue line, Nick Pavlich was in front of the net, and St. Cloud State's got a lead here in the
Welcome back to the Den, Huskies Warming House podcast fans. It is episode number 52 here. Crazy to believe we're already over 50 episodes here on this first week of March. It's almost playoff season here for college hockey. We're going to touch on what it means for men's hockey here after their win against Duluth, heading into the Frozen Faceoff for the NCHC tournament. We're going to talk a little bit in our Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup about quite a bit of happenings around the hockey world once again. Another busy week, and then we're going to have a lot of fun with a listener mailbag section this week to see what you fans have questions for us on the show. And then I have some trivia of my own that I'm going to ask Nick Maxon, bringing back our Huskies hat trick trivia for the first time in a long time. You won't want to miss it here as we start in the CenterIceView News and Notes.
CenterIceView News and Notes. CenterIceView provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to CenterIceView.com.
And the CenterIceView News and Notes in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Our first topic of the day is that the NCHC regular season has finally come to an end, and the league standings are all set for the NCHC tournament field up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which starts this Friday, March 12th. There will be 3,000 fans in attendance at Ralph Engelstad Arena, with number 2 St. Cloud taking on number 7 Colorado College at 2:30 p.m., number 1 North Dakota taking on number 1 Miami at 7:30 p.m. on Saturday the 13th. Omaha facing number 5 Denver at 2:30. Also on Saturday, while number 6 Western Michigan and number 3 Duluth are at 7:30. Frozen Faceoff does not resume until Monday, March 15th, where the winner of SCSU and CC faces the winner of Duluth as well as Western Michigan. The winner of UND Miami beats the winner of Denver Omaha, and the championship game will take place on Tuesday, March 16th at 7:30 p.m. up in Grand Forks, North Dakota.
Should be exciting, Nick. Can't wait to get that one rolling. Moving over to the women's side in the WCHA, there's little news in St. Cloud State as they are done, obviously, for the season. But the WCHA playoffs were in action. Wisconsin did narrowly beat Minnesota by a 5-3 score, while Ohio State trounced Duluth 7-2. Ohio State will face Wisconsin today on Sunday at 2 p.m. And later tonight, actually at 8 o'clock Central Time, the 8-team bracket will be announced for the NCAA tournament for this year, which will take place in Erie, Pennsylvania. Games for that will start on March 15th. However, moving to the men's side of the WCHA, something we haven't really talked about this year, former guest of the show, Don Lucia, was named WCHA 2000s Coach of the Decade, presented by Anderson's Pure Maple Syrup Inspire Credit Union. His 510 wins and 837 games coached in the WCHA both stand number 2 in the league, only behind Jeff Sauer, who won 655 games at Colorado College and Wisconsin. Lucia's 7 WCHA regular season titles at CC and Minnesota tie him with 1960s WCHA Coach of the Decade Murray Armstrong of Denver for the most won by a coach in the league. He is the 6th of 7 Coach of the Decade honorees that will be announced by the WCHA during this season. The WCHA is also honoring an outstanding player and selecting an all-decade team for each decade as the league is celebrating 70 years of excellence. The WCHA 2000s Player of the Decade will be announced on March 4th.
Moving over to the National Hockey League, Noah, the state of Minnesota here, the Wild had a little up and down week. some spurts of great play. The Wild did drop 3 of 4 games last week, but they have pushed their record over the past 10 games to 7-2-1. An overtime and regulation loss to Las Vegas before a split in Arizona leaves Minnesota with a little bit more questions than answers as they head into 3 games this week. The Wild return home for 2 contests against the Vegas Golden Knights and another one Friday against Arizona. However, rookie sensation Kirill Kaprizov leads the team with 19 points in 22 games so far. Minnesota is also dealing with the departure of goaltender Alex Stalock, who was claimed off of waivers by the Edmonton Oilers last week. The 33-year-old Minnesota native has not played this season due to a heart condition called myocarditis after a positive COVID-19 test back in November. Myocarditis is an inflammation of the heart muscle and could lead to cardiac arrest if Stalock continued to play instead of rest.
Moving over to sadder news, the hockey world is reeling from the passing of a pair of influences on the game this past week. In Canada, Walter Gretzky passed away at the age of 82. Gretzky, who is the father of hockey phenom Wayne Gretzky, died from complications of Parkinson's disease. Many current and former players, coaches, and communities praised the work that Walter did for the game, naming him the ultimate hockey dad, from making outdoor rinks, helping with community practices in Brantford, Ontario, and speaking publicly at many ceremonies and events. Battling through a coma from a skull fracture in his 30s, a stroke in his 50s, and health complications until his passing, Walter was a constant figure in Wayne's life and growth into an NHL superstar. His wife Phyllis passed away from lung cancer in 2005. On the American side, 1980 Olympic gold medalist Mark Pavlich died at the age of 63. Mark assisted on that game-winning goal to Mike Eruzione in the legendary game against the Soviet Union in February of 1980 to help the United States capture that iconic gold medal. A veteran of 355 NHL games with the New York Rangers, Minnesota North Stars, and San Jose Sharks, Mark was plagued by potential effects from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, otherwise known as CTE, due to repeated collisions with his brain. He passed away at a residential treatment center from unknown causes at this time. Pavlich was in the facility after an incident in 2019 caused him to assault his neighbor, inflicting broken bones. After 7 points in those Olympic Games, Pavlich went on to set a franchise record for most points by a Rangers rookie in 1981 with 76. He retired after 6 seasons in the NHL. We wish the families of both parties the best moving forward through this difficult time.
More news around the National Hockey League, some coaches that are hiring, some coaches that have been fired, and some other players retiring this past week. In Calgary, first off, Jeff Ward was relieved of his head coaching duties after 2 seasons behind the bench. And the Flames brought in a familiar face by rehiring Daryl Sutter, a 2-time Stanley Cup champion with the Los Angeles Kings in 2012 and 2014, respectively. And he returns for his second stint at Alberta after he pushed the Flames to Game 7 in the 2004 Stanley Cup final, where they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning to capture their first ever franchise Stanley Cup. The 63-year-old has had a tough task ahead in Calgary as they sit 5th in the North Division. But staying in Canada, Montreal made another intriguing move to the coaching staff as general manager Marc Bergevin fired their goalie coach Stefan Waite, replacing him with former NHL goalie Sean Perk. Firings aren't exactly the most shocking business in the hockey world. This one was, as Waite was fired in the second intermission of last Tuesday's game against Ottawa. Perk has been a scout with the team since 2016, but his new role is still yet undefined with his contract ending this season. He spent 18 seasons in the crease during his NHL career, lastly with the Chicago Blackhawks. Lastly, the Chicago Blackhawks said goodbye to former defenseman Brent Seabrook. The 35-year-old had played all 15 seasons with the team before retiring just this last week and helped them to 3 Stanley Cups from 2010 to 2015. Seabrook hasn't played a game since December of 2019 with a long-term issue in his right hip. His career ends with over 450 points as a defenseman in just over 1,100 games played.
In our final story of the weekly roundup, 3 suspensions were handed out. The injury train just keeps on rolling around the National Hockey League, and an intriguing story is out there about a former NHLer this past week in Michigan. The big suspension comes from Washington as Capitals forward Tom Wilson earned his 5th suspension of his career, a 7-game ban for boarding Boston's Brandon Carlo. In the West, Edmonton's Alex Chiasson was given a 1-game seat for a cross-checking major, and a 2-game suspension for Joachim Blichfeld's high hit has led to Colorado superstar Nathan McKinnon missing at least a week with injury. Anaheim rearguard Hampus Lindholm will miss 6 weeks with a fractured wrist, and Nashville is without a pair of players for the long term, as defenseman Ryan Ellis is out 4 to 6 weeks with an upper body ailment, and centerman Matt Duchene is out 3 to 5 weeks with a lower body issue. In the East, New Jersey's new captain Nico Hischier is week to week with a sinus fracture after taking a puck to the face. And Ottawa's Derek Stepan will miss the remainder of the year with a dislocated shoulder. Finally, a man who is no stranger to causing significant injury was arrested on suspicion of a DUI this past week. 46-year-old Todd Bertuzzi was reportedly jailed in Michigan, swerving all over the road and running a red light before he was pulled over. The former 1,150-game NHL veteran is most known for his sucker punch that led to the end of Steve Moore's career with the Avalanche in the NHL during a game in 2003. Once again, welcome back into the den. I'm Noah Grant, joined alongside my co-host Nick Maxon, who's looking about as Midwestern as ever today. Nick, speaking of Midwestern things, I want to throw this out there before I get your take on how you're doing this week. I did get a text last night from my mom telling me about a sale happening. We don't really promote things on the show, but Duluth Trading Co. having a really big sale on t-shirts and underwear, Nick. I'm just saying, for all the guys out there, if you're looking for some comfy underwear that are, I mean, the markdown price, I think, I mean, you got like $30 like pairs of underwear that are like $10 or $12 right now. And I think the sale is going to last for a couple of weeks. So definitely go and check that out. I would highly, highly recommend from personal experience. And that's all we're going to say about that. Nick, other than that, how are you doing this week?
Well, that was quite the intro I was not expecting this morning. Doing all right. You know, the Huskies took care of business last night down there at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. Not quite the overall performance we were hoping to. We'll actually touch on that a little bit later. I know that. But overall, it's been a good week. It's finally spring break for St. Cloud State students this week. We'll get a little bit of like break from classes. However, there is some things that we're working on with Husky Productions leading up to the NCHC Frozen Face-Off. So not much of a break for me, but excited that it's going to be 60 degrees down here today in Minneapolis. So that's a sign towards spring, even though true Minnesotan, as I'm, kind of sporting the Paul Bunyan look today.
Yes.
I'm skeptical because we know that Minnesota likes to, false advertise per se. So I'm going to enjoy today's weather a little bit with a surprisingly rare day off that, I'm going to have after this. Besides a work meeting that'll last me till about 5 o'clock. But beyond that, just pretty good. What about you up there in good old Bottineau, North Dakota?
It is weird to think that we went through the end of February without snow. Like, that's just, I can't remember the last time we've gone through that where, I look around and there's grass like everywhere, like not even the little pockets of snow that normally kind of like rest up against buildings or like, the sides of freeways, that sort of thing. We don't see anything. And yeah, it's pushing about 45, 50 degrees coming up this week. So you said that St. Cloud State's spring break is this week, like March 9th through whatever. So our spring break is a week later. So I actually have, I have clinicals coming up this week, our first clinical for nursing school. And then actually right around when the NCHC tournament starts on that Friday is actually when my spring break actually officially begins. So that's kind of really nice timing. Who knows? I'm close enough to Grand Forks. If the Huskies win on Friday, maybe I'll go check out and see that second round game. Hopefully, if they can make it there on that Monday, because whoever's going to be in that game, that's going to be a really good hockey game, I believe. But other than that, just kind of hanging out, staying busy. I ordered kind of like those home meal type things, like that, like the meal companies that they send you. Yeah, essentially. And I was kind of skeptical. I've always kind of thought about it, but I live alone. So it's when you're cooking for yourself, it's a little bit different as far as like, how you're buying ingredients and, portion sizes and serving sizes. You want to make sure you're making yourself, leftovers and being able to kind of like get something out of the meal. But, if I make meatballs and I make enough meatballs for 4 days, well, by day 4, I'm just absolutely sick of eating meatballs. You know what I mean? So it's a real balancing act. So I tried my first one. I had some fish and chips that, you cut the fries yourself out of the potatoes and, cook the fish in the nice little batter that you made there. I got to say, Nick, I was really impressed with the product so far. So I guess we'll see. I think we have chicken and zucchini on the docket. And then I think we have some kind of like beef mushroom stroganoff that we have this week. So I'm pretty excited about that and been working out a little bit, although I don't think it shows. So a very busy week for us as we wind into the playoff season. I think it's fitting to move over into men's hockey here before we get into some listener questions here. Nick, we did have a trivia question for Two Line Trivia this past week, and we finally had our official winner for season 1 of trivia. Don't forget, trivia every Saturday at noon. Season 1 ends the last trivia will actually be April 11th, the day of the national championship game in the NCAA. So this season, St. Cloud State men's hockey's Vieti Miettinen leads the team with 22 points on the season, entering the final game today, and actually ended the season leading the team. When is the last time a freshman led St. Cloud State in scoring, aka what year was it and who was it? Nick, do you have any idea who this would be?
Oh, I have no idea, honestly.
Do you have take a stab at a season, and then I'll tell you the answer. How about that?
How about 2013? We'll just stab that.
Even earlier, back in the old WCHA, 2006, 2007, Andreas Nodal was.
That would make sense.
Which is interesting because he did not lead the team in scoring his sophomore year. That was actually Ryan Lash as a sophomore that year. So that's good for win number 12 for Brody Falconer. Nodal did finish with 18 goals and 28 assists for 46 points that year in 40 games played. And Brody, based on just math and eligibility, will end up as our champion of season 1 of trivia, which ends on April 11th. So congratulations to Brody. He's been one of our avid followers since pretty much day number 1. So a well-deserving victory for Brody. And we'll have to see if he shows up for season number 2 or if someone takes the mantle here. But Nick, men's hockey, getting the victory in overtime, 2 points, a 4-3 win at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center yesterday on March 6th. I think my favorite moment in the game, and it was tweeted by @GoHuskiesWoo, that's 5 O's in case you were curious, at 1:31 p.m. Central Time, quote, Micah Miller just murdered a man, end quote. That was one heck of a hit by Micah. I asked his mom, what he's been feeding that child, and she said pizza, so I guess that checks out. Nick, what was your impression of the Huskies hockey game? And I have a feeling that if I ask you what your first period impression of the hockey game versus the full hockey game, it might be a little bit varying answers, if you will.
It would be. First period, we talked about this in the recap last night, is probably the best 20 minutes we've seen them play. I think I alluded to it a little bit during that short recap that it almost seemed like that was sort of like their statement 20 minutes where they were frustrated, and that's kind of where they got their frustrations out. There was obviously a lot of emotion. They wanted to kind of reestablish themselves that they were the better hockey team, and they certainly did so. The problem is that and I don't know if this was indeed the case, but it almost seemed like they just ran out of gas or the emotion just wasn't there. I think they got a little comfortable in that 3-0 lead after the first 20 minutes. And you can't do that against a team that's won back-to-back national championships. Yes, UMD isn't quite the same caliber team, but they're still the same very well-coached team that is under coach Scott Sandlin. You just cannot give that team any room. They're a resilient bunch. They showed it. They ended up tying it in the third period, and the Huskies, they kind of ran around a little bit, especially the second, third period. Defensively was not great. Offensively, they weren't cycling the puck. They weren't, keeping the puck on their sticks. They were just a lot of one and done offensive chances. David Renick bailed them out, especially in the second period, had a couple of really key saves in the third. And just essentially that team survived to get to overtime, and Noel Walker decided just to take the ice in front of him for that overtime winner, and a really bad, actually, defensive breakdown there for the Bulldogs there in that overtime. I did break that down on Fox 9 Plus during that hockey game. So the Huskies did catch a little of a break. And if I'm Brett Larson, I love that first 20 minutes, but I'm not liking the rest of that game. And, there's still some things to improve, but at the end of it, there's at least a little bit of confidence going into the first round of the NCAA playoffs. Is better than a loss, because that would have been a pretty bad one to take, especially when you go up 3-0 against a hockey club.
Yeah, I think the finish is really important. I know that a lot of us, I was actually, for one of the few times, actually kind of yelling at my TV. I mean, with the frustration of the inability for the Huskies to kind of make some simple passes and 10-foot plays to just get out of the zone, especially, in the last couple of minutes, just pucks off the glass. If anything, alleviate that pressure. But the Huskies, they survived it. They weathered the storm. And that's a tournament type game. You might have a game where sometimes you fall flat for 20 or 40 minutes and you got to find a way to hang in a hockey game. You did mention David Renick. We're going to touch on him, I think, a little bit. As you mentioned, that first period, shots were 20-6 in favor of the Huskies. Both teams finishing with 34 shots, but shots through the last two periods were 28-14, including that lone shot in overtime for the Huskies. But that was in favor of the Duluth Bulldogs. You can tell how much Duluth really came out and it kind of pounced on the opportunity. I think the worst thing that happened for the Huskies was the first intermission, because they were just absolutely rolling. And it's, sometimes it's difficult. It makes me think of, I know hockey players, it wasn't an abnormal game, but it makes me think of the Super Bowl halftime. When you think about teams that are rolling so well in the first half, and then that halftime becomes a lengthy thing and kind of, it can change the complexion of the game potentially. And like you mentioned, you knew Duluth was not going to back down. Before we get to David Renick, because I have a couple comments on that, the fourth goal that never actually happened until overtime for the Huskies. The original fourth goal that was disallowed because of that early whistle might have been a changing point for the Huskies as far as Duluth kind of realized, hey, we just kind of got away with one there. Let's continue to pressure and build our game. I know there was some frustration with, like we got screwed over by the refs, that sort of thing. I'm looking at that from an official's perspective. That is such a routine shot that is coming in on a goaltender, and his reaction, especially where the official was positioned. I think the official's hands were tied. Was it a little bit of an early whistle? Maybe. But, generally a puck like that doesn't squeak through a goaltender like that. I can't really blame the official, Nick. Can you?
No, and so a couple of things that people need to understand is that the officials are taught, and most folks of in this hockey market know this, when they lose sight of the puck, they're supposed to blow it dead. Now, a couple of things can press a referee to not blow the whistle. First of all, sort of the posture of stay skull. When he is sitting there and essentially pressing the puck, at least he thought he was pressing the puck against his pad and his blocker, and effectively giving the ref confidence that this puck wasn't loose, you're pretty much just almost an automatic mode there for referees. Like, oh, yep, he's got it, and you're blowing the whistle. And from his position, too, the referee was in the corner, the near side corner, too. He's looking through the net. At that point, the puck would have been nearest to him. That's going to be blocked by the net anyway. So there would have been no line of sight for the puck. From his perspective, as you mentioned, though, he made the correct referee call there. He had to blow the whistle dead. Now, I will say this, if Stay-Skull felt the puck go through him, he does a turn, the referee is going to react differently to that. I do think that there's a difference there where he turns, looks like he's panicking a bit. The referee then skates and looks for a loose puck. Maybe that goes in, but that's just one of those things that nobody can really control. It's just part of the game. I've seen some people compare this to like baseball umpiring, and I don't really buy that issue because it's two separate, completely different things. But at the end of it, it's I don't even call it a human error. I really don't. It's at that point, the puck to the referee's eyes are frozen, and you almost wish that. I know the Hockey Night in Canada does this really well. They actually put a live camera feed on a referee's helmet, and they actually use it in replays to kind of give people an idea of what the referee's actually seen and more importantly, what they can't see. And at the end of the day, you can't, as a referee, assume things, right? You don't want to be part of, deciding what happens in a game. To me, it was the correct call to blow a whistle. There was just unfortunate the puck was loose in a very, particular spot behind the goaltender where nobody really could see it.
Yeah, and at a point in the game where 4-0 looks a lot different than 3-0 or whatever, that fourth goal could have been a dagger, which, I can understand Husky fans' frustration. You want that goal to count, right? The other thing that I think factored into that too, like you mentioned, besides the fact that it looked like a routine play and a routine save, the puck actually didn't squirt free right away. It hit him and kind of like rumbled around and took that extra half second to kind of like come out from behind him. And that's another thing too, where sometimes if, he thinks he's made the save, but the puck is out right away. One, the players are going to react because they're going to see the loose puck. But number two, sometimes the official that's on the backside or the reverse side is able to yell loose, to kind of let the official know that puck is, it's free and that play should be blown dead. So, it was just a fortuitous bounce for Duluth. I know that, the NCHC people like to kind of give a hard time about the officiating. Yeah, there's some good calls, there's some bad calls, but name a hockey league that doesn't have those, right? Name that adversity where it's like, hey, come tournament time, you got to be willing to adapt to the adversity that you might face on the ice sheet. Speaking of goaltenders, though, Nick, I'm going to be honest with you. We got two kind of nasty comments about David Renick potentially not starting in yesterday's game because of how poorly he played the week previous up in Duluth. So I kind of want to address that a little bit very quickly. I would say, Nick, between you and I'm not just saying that just because we're here and trying to, cover our ass. I would say we believe in this group and we believe in all three of the goaltenders, as much, if not more than any fan or team personnel out there. Like, we want David to succeed. We want these guys to succeed. And I think like our job on this podcast, we kind of like to, assess and evaluate what we've seen, but we also kind of like to pause it, what is going through in that locker room. it would not be the first time that we have seen a goaltending change close to a tournament time or playoff time for a hockey team. Like if Jackson Castor would have started, I think you and I, when we went into the show last week, kind of really thought about what is going through Brett Larson's head. Will he make this decision to take David out? But moreover, what did we see, and what is a question that we can posit to our listeners for them to think about? Now, as Dave Starman kind of alluded to, one of my favorite things he said is, you can walk up to us and tell us you suck, and we'll buy that argument. You just got to tell us why. And we are more than happy to talk objectively about the game of hockey. When the comments kind of, push more towards that personal side and don't really have an evaluation of what we said, you don't have to agree with our comments on David Renick last week. You don't have to. That's part of it. Is it's good that you don't agree, because I think it drives our listener engagement and drives us to think about what we're thinking about. But I would say between you and I, Nick, you and I both, knew that David Renick probably was the guy. And if David was going to play, that we wanted him to succeed and bounce back. And he did exactly that.
So to sort of readdress that, coaching staffs have such a difficult decision when it comes to goaltending, and how do you, I suppose, what's the best way to move forward to help a goaltender sort of, come out of the cauldrons of that, right? It's not an easy thing. Some goaltenders need a game off. Some want to get back in the net right away and improve themselves. No question, there's a conversation between Brett Larson and David Renick. Hey, how do you feel right now? There's no question that David Renick last weekend did not look great. Now, is it all on David Renick? No, the team in front of him also did not look great either. So are we trying to pin this on one person? No. But I think people don't understand, for those who haven't been around, sort of the back door, the back office of hockey, realize that goaltending, decisions are not very linear. They're not at all. Every goaltender is going to react differently. And at the end of it, for a coach, especially now, especially the timing of that, your second to last game of the regular season, you want your starting goaltender to be your rock. You want him to be locked and dialed in. And if that means you sit him for a game just to maybe, wake him up a little bit, and that kind of, you put him in maybe the game afterwards. You've seen coaches do that. You've seen coaches, where it's like, I trust in you, but I'm also going to try to, kind of push a couple buttons for you because I want you to come out with fire. And it looked like to me, David Renick definitely realized that he was not up to his A game. He looked really, really good last night, especially in key saves, a couple different breakaways he had. And, we talk about the response game, right? David Renick had a response game. The question is, can you keep that same intensity? That's my question throughout the rest of the playoffs, especially the conference wins and hopefully the NCAAs. So no, and like you said, we're here to talk about this team objectively. If that means we have to say, hey, they're not playing great and we believe this maybe one player or maybe the whole team in front of them isn't playing well, that's fine. And again, you don't have to agree with us. And I'm not here to kiss anybody's ass. I'm sorry, I'm not. At the end of it, the players know this, the coaches know that. There's a reason why that I can, essentially call any one of these coaches up and have a conversation with them, and they respect that I'm out there trying to give them the truth, essentially, and just look for that. So I take great pride in that. They know where I'm coming from. They know that I'm going to, approach them in a respectable way. And at the end of it, these are tough times. And last week, it's very easy to dissect and essentially have a fired up emotions about a loss. We're not having this conversation if they won that game. So at the end of it, yeah, a lot of varying opinions, and that's fine. But I stand by what I said, 100%.
Yeah, and I stand by you too, because it's an honest caveat to the game. And I think about this in the sense that I remember, actually it was yesterday, 1 year ago yesterday, the last time you and I were ever together and did a hockey game together. And do you remember, I guess you probably weren't downstairs in the media deck, but I was covering for the Chronicle as well after we did the radio piece and, doing the post-game interview with Brett. And you could see, Brett came out of the locker room. You can see that demeanor when he knows his team didn't play well. And he's kind of like, oh, I got to go talk to the media. And I don't say that as an offense to Brett. I just, as former players, you and I, we know what that's like to walk out of the locker room knowing you have to confront the media when you didn't play well, when you didn't have your best effort. And he knows, the question is going to be, Brett, why didn't your team play well tonight? What was the deal with David Renick? Why did this happen? And those are difficult questions to answer. The game before when the Huskies win 4-0 on home ice, decisive win against Colorado College, Yeah, that's a fun day for the media, fun day for the coaches, because it's easy to be able to talk about that and move on. But, when you have those weeks that are difficult, that's the adversity that's going to help you grow and become better as a team. And like you mentioned, we are here to be objective, but we're also, like, internally, we are the biggest supporters of the Huskies because we get to see the ins and outs of these kids and the effort that they go through. But I guess my response to that is, if there's anybody, especially, like close to the team, that is frustrated, and not that there was, but if they were frustrated with our comments, my response is, if you're frustrated with our analysis of the game, the players are responsible for the outcome of the game. The players are responsible for that effort. So
Play better.
Yep. And they did for the first 20 minutes. And then David Renick held him in for the last 40. That's the David Renick we know. I think between you and I, we want to see that consistency piece. And we were frustrated with the weekend before and David's performance because we know the level that David can get to. He's the all-time leader in shutouts in franchise history for this group. We know the level that he can get to. We just need to see that on a nightly basis. Last question about David Renick and the men's hockey team here. That save in the second period, the outstretched blocker save, is that a save of the year candidate for the NCHC?
I think it is. At the end of it, first of all, David Renick, I think Pat Micheletti mentioned it pretty well. He went down really early in that slide from left to right, and more of a desperation save, of course. So you can't really control your entire body, but sometimes as a goaltender, you just have to fight it off, right? Sometimes just got to get a piece of it and just hope for the best. And for Renick, he's leaning forward quite a bit. So there's not a whole lot of chest there to hit. And then he's able to just pull up that right blocker and just get enough of it. And yeah, it's that effort. It's that I'm going to try to put whatever I can to deflect the puck either to the side or over the net. I don't care, live to fight another day. And he absolutely did that. And that's, we talk about the goaltender that can steal you a game or a period. That was the kind of save. And to me, David Renick, I would argue, almost stole that game for the Huskies in the last two periods because of how well he played and considering how much the team regressed in front of him for the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, and you talk about desperation saves. To give listeners a quick perspective here, desperation saves like that David made essentially means that David was screwed at that particular moment. It means that he was, I don't want to say out of position because it was just a nice zone entry there, but what goaltenders are taught is that when Nick mentioned the chest, when they're making that T-push, in this case from his glove side to his blocker side, left to right, your goal is to keep your upper body as upward as you possibly can and take away as much of the net while extending the upper part of your body and limbs towards the side that you think the shooter is going to take, which in this case would be the far side because the shooter is, on the opposite side of the ice. And then as you see David start to tip forward, that means that his core or his movement isn't able to keep him upwards anymore. So like you mentioned, then it becomes kind of a hope and a prayer, if you will, essentially flailing that arm up and seeing if you can put anything in front of the puck. David was able to make that save, but you have to credit his athleticism, those desperation saves. We see goaltenders that, they make the saves that they need to, which David did yesterday. And then they also make the saves that maybe they're not expected to make on a 2-on-1 rush like that. So hopefully he can continue. Obviously the Huskies back in action, 2:30 p.m. On Friday, March 12th against the Colorado College Tigers. The winner of that game will get the winner of the Western Michigan and Duluth game. So a big tough test and a big tough road for the Huskies, I think, honestly, entering that tournament. I mean, that's not an easy road to have to face, if you win the first game, having to face the winner of Western Michigan and Duluth. It does not get any easier, but I think it's going to be a test that the Huskies hopefully respond to, but also they're going to need moving into tournament time. And I think it would be a lot, different if they kind of had the easy road. I think it's going to push this team into a position that's going to make them better. Nick, do you have anything to add on that? First of all, did you want to?
No, that was it.
Okay, cool. So we're going to move over to our listener questions here, a listener mailbag for the day here. I do want to give a shout out. He didn't have a listener question because he does comment on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page. Usually we kind of only push out essentially the episodes and that sort of thing. But there's a guy on Facebook, Nick, by the name of Jim Tracy. And I kind of want to give him his shout out because every single show that we do, he leaves, a 1-paragraph, 2-paragraph, 3-paragraph comment about our show, what he liked, what he didn't like. That's really nice feedback for us to hear. And, he's a very good supporter of the show. So Jim Tracy from the Huskies Warming House podcast, a big stick tap and a shout out for you because your engagement, especially on a platform that we, only use for almost business in a sense, for him to kind of give us his feedback, not only every week, but every episode. We really enjoy it. And I really enjoy what he has to say because he's usually has some really nice things to say. So Nick, we're going to go through, do you want the St. Cloud State questions first, or do you want the more, let's just roll through with some St. Cloud State questions to start here. Yeah. This one, we'll probably go back. Let me look here. We had 5 people that sent us questions. Some of them, the most we had was 7. That's from our boy, Caleb Peabody here. And the least amount we had was 1. Caleb, I got to be honest with you, man. For as much as you tweet at us, you have yet to be annoying to us, and you are one funny dude. Nick and I were talking about that before the show. You are a funny dude, man. So kudos to, we appreciate it. You know what's funny? I think with Caleb, I don't think he ever started tweeting at us or followed us until right before the NCHC pod, right in the beginning of December. He hasn't been following us that long, but it feels like he's been there forever. And that's a credit to his engagement. But I think professionally, he's a brand and marketing strategist. So maybe he just knows how to promote all of us very equally. But he had a couple questions. We'll start with some St. Cloud State questions he had. He had some other ones that we're going to get to here. But number one, Nick, I want to posit this one to you because you're kind of, I think, the resident expert between the two of us here. What St. Cloud State recruits are you excited about for the next year and beyond, assuming Wisconsin hasn't already signed them?
So I've seen actually a couple of these guys actually, and I think the first one that I really am excited for is Jack Perk, the defenseman from Grand Rapids. To me, he's more of that stay-at-home defenseman. Really good feet, though. He's very smart in his IQ. Just overall, just sees the ice very, very well, and I think he's going to be a really good addition to the defensive core. He was part of that Minnesota All-Star Prospects game that I called last November there with a different parish. That would be Mark's brother, to say the least. We have to have him on the show at some time. A couple other ones, Mason Sahlquist and Josh Ludetke, a couple of forwards. Mason is a forward. He's a center for Fargo. And then Josh Ludetke, the right defenseman for Des Moines. Both these guys can skate. Mason Sahlquist is having himself a year up in Fargo. Josh Ludetke, more of that offensive defenseman. All these guys, by the way, are supposed to be joining the Huskies next season. So I just wanted to make sure that I made that. But also another Ashan coming into the fold, Grant Ashan, who's with Bismarck, obviously played down in Burnsville in his high school as well. But the last Ashan coming through is supposed to be joining us. He's up at Bismarck. So those 4 for me are the big ones. A couple other ones. Evan Bushy also is supposed to be, yes, it is the brother of current Huskies defender, Brendan Bushy. He's with the Minnesota Wilderness right now. So to me, those guys stick out to me. But again, you talk about prospects and, have they signed their letter of intent yet? I don't think they have yet. So there's still some up in the air with those, but if they do indeed sign their NLI, those are the guys that I'd be watching for next season. And that leads into a really good question. We might kind of bounce around between our 5 people that send us questions because a lot of them did send us multiple questions. And this one comes from @SCSU_Huskies, otherwise known as SCSU Hockey Fanatic. And one of his questions was the NCAA rule that this year doesn't count against student eligibility. For an NCAA coach, what do you do if your entire team wants to come back? How do you tell all of your incoming freshmen, like you just mentioned, to wait another year, or do you tell a senior he won't have a scholarship if he returns? Nick, let's say most of the Huskies do come back for their super senior year. What does Brett Larson, Nick Oliver, and Dave Shayak, how do they manage that situation in your opinion? Well, I think it depends on the player, obviously. I don't think you can blanket that. At the end of it, if every single senior comes back, so it's Brodzinski, you have Fitzgerald, Will Hammer's another part of that, David Renick, you're going to take those guys back in your roster. You don't have to teach them. You know that they know the style. You know that, they know what to expect from the coaching staff. And I think it becomes a group conversation at that point, right? Depending on these freshmen, I don't know how you can say that because, could you argue with some of the players on this current roster? I'm not going to point out names specifically, but some have not had a consistent spot on this roster, right? So it kind of becomes you're talking with some of your signees, go, hey, this is, what we have going on. This is what we're doing moving forward. Now, if the coaching staff wants these guys to come back, that's one thing, right? So you have to figure out who's staying and who's going. And then with that, how many potentially open roster spots you have, and then I would say you give the freshmen the choice. Hey, we got these, you can definitely come and compete for a spot, but I think it depends on, the freshmen coming in, are they NCAA ready? And, or maybe they would benefit from another year in junior. Who knows? So it's not as linear of a conversation as I think it's being presented, Noah. And at the end of it, if you're bringing up guys like Jack Perk, who I do think is NCAA ready, he can compete for a spot on that blue line. I really do think he could. Mason Saltquist, maybe he could compete for a spot in the four, but maybe some of the others maybe they need one more year. Who knows? That's a very, very difficult conversation. And I think, again, you start with the seniors. You figure out, who's there, what circumstances, and I think, to me, obviously, you keep those guys, no question. But then you just pose the question to your incoming freshmen what they want to do. Do you think they can compete? Do the coaching staff think that they're ready? And at the end of it, again, this has been a year of the pandemic. So, how much playing time have these folks and juniors had? Maybe they need to do another year anyway because they want some more experience. They want to develop a little bit more. It's kind of a crapshoot, to be honest with you.
Yes,
so to me, it's not quite as easy of an answer as one may think.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts to that. I think number one is the player that you're getting, because you have to remember a freshman in the NCAA does not always mean true freshman. So you have to look at what is their eligibility for juniors. Some players don't have a choice, and they have to go to their teams. Number two, again, how many players are coming back for the Huskies in that super senior year? Number three, how many roster spots, like you mentioned, are open? And if there's not roster spots open, one, are those players comfortable coming in, getting that NCAA exposure, but essentially not playing a whole lot? And number two, if they know they're probably not going to play a lot coming out of camp, does Brett Larson and company, do they redshirt them and kind of let them wait that extra year and see that development? Because one of the things that you have to remember is, if you have a player who's turning 21 years old and has to go the NCAA route, sometimes either having them, I almost said on the taxi squad, but in the kind of that red shirt mentality, or kind of on the practice squad, if you will still benefit them if you think they're going to grow in that environment. Because then when those, juniors now becoming seniors, guys like Micah Miller and stuff like that, when they leave and then the super seniors leave, then you have this big void of roster spots open, and you want guys that can jump in and fill that void and be NCAA ready. We think about guys like Yami Krannila, a guy who had a decent freshman year, but has really jumped leaps and bounds in his sophomore year, that NCAA, level of exposure, and that learning how to train, learning how to get bigger, learning how to get stronger. Those are things sometimes you can't teach on those junior teams. So you kind of have to individually, I think, assess what is best for the player, coming in, going back to junior, or coming in and staying with the team. And then, like you mentioned, we just don't know how many of these guys are going to stay or decide to, try to turn professional, or just kind of hang up the skates and go do what they want to do. A lot of moving parts, and it's a question that I think it's safe to say, Nick, you and I don't really have an opportunity to answer at this particular time, because we just don't know. I mean, the number one question is who is coming back and how many roster spots are going to fill. Don't forget, we've had a handful of healthy scratches that have already been with the team this year too, that you think about guys like Will Hammer, the first 2 seasons of his career didn't play a whole lot. You've got your guys, I think, like a guy like Trevor Zins maybe, might start to jump into the lineup, in his next season as well. So, I mean, you got guys that have been on the sidelines in that role a little bit that are going to be vying for those spots, along with those freshmen, trying to make sure that they're a consistent piece in that lineup as well. It'll be a very interesting discussion, and one that I'm sure we will be revisiting very, very soon here. Kind of sticking on the recruiting trail here, Nick. This is the only question from @FightThePants, otherwise known as Johnny Main. Still Fight the Pants. I feel like it's Fight the Pants. I got a feeling it's like where you eat too much food and you're fighting your pants, like you're fighting your pants size. I don't know what it means, but that's my best guess on this one. But his only question was, without Gibby, Mike Gibbons, are the Huskies still prioritizing international recruiting? And if so, who is involved and where are they looking? Nick, before I kick it over to you, I guess my 2 cents on this one is, do the Huskies prioritize international recruiting? I think they just prioritize recruiting players that are the best players, available. I mean, it's, are they, do you know that if you don't take the time to at least sit down and watch video, or maybe take a couple of trips overseas to see, what the Swedish and Finnish leagues, and that international and European group is giving you, you have to take the time and do that. But I would say they prioritize the best player available, and Dave Shayak and Nick Oliver are going to be 2 big components of that piece. Brett Larson, a little bit, not so much anymore, but Brett understands that, the resources that they're tapping into and kind of the process behind that. But Nick, I would say that they're just always on the grind, I think, if that makes sense. This is probably the only time moving into playoff season where they're probably not going to be on the grind at this particular time, and they're still on the grind quite a bit.
So I want to reframe the question, because it's prioritizing international play. You mentioned it right. You're always trying to prioritize the best player available, but to a sense, you're almost prioritizing existing relationship is really what it is, because Mike Gibbons is the one that has established that. And, and again, we have VT, we have Yami, and, that's a pipeline that can feature some really good young talent, and you don't want to let that go. So to me, it is on Nick Oliver and Dave Shack to continue that relationship. And there's no question that with the history of this hockey club, that there is a very good pipeline of players coming over from, the West European countries. And to me, I think that, you have to at least massage that, every single year. And whether there's actually players that you can get or players that want to come over here and take the college route, that's one thing, but you have to at least step in. It's almost like you're a salesman, and at the end of it, not all the time you're going to get a sale out of it, but you have to at least have the, hey, how you doing? Take them out to dinner, at least let them know you're still there kind of thing. So yeah, you have to always make every connection a priority when you're recruiting. You have to always let them know you're looking. And at the end of it, whether it results in anything as far as product wise, that's secondary in my opinion, because at some point when the right conversations happen, we had it on the show, a couple of weeks ago, Yami, he was actually not even looking, and then Gibbons saw him score 5 goals, and all of a sudden it was like, sure, I'll come over. So at the end of it, you have to have those repeated trips over there, saying hi, watching games, and it's been tougher obviously with the pandemic. So I think this year, maybe even next year, it might be a little bit more on the dry side just because of the travel limitations. But no question, when they're able to more freely, you'll definitely know that St. Cloud will be over there looking for talent.
And you mentioned this year and next year being a little bit dry. Those are actually things that we might not see the residual effects of until 3 or 4 years down the road, as the recruiting process starts when guys are 15, 16, 17 years old in a lot of cases. We have 3 more St. Cloud State questions as far as, the Huskies are concerned, obviously. And these... Let's stay actually probably on the recruiting piece a little bit. Obviously, you want to have a facility that is kind of top notch. The Herbrooks National Hockey Center is an older building. This one comes from @SCSU_Huskies. Have you heard any additional conversations about the Herbrooks National Hockey Center going down to that NHL size, 200 by 85? I heard that when they do it, it might happen. And if yes, how could this affect the Huskies considering how good they've always been on an Olympic sheet? Well, to start off, the Huskies are good on an Olympic sheet when they want to be. I think case in point last night. But to kind of reiterate what the issue is, from what we've understood, the two challenges, one's a barrier and one's also a barrier that has to happen regardless. Number one is that I think, Nick, you mentioned me pre-show that the foundation is actually like a dirt. It's not a solid foundation. So you have some water table issues that are going to be a real big factor here. The second thing is the question mark of the rink size actually comes down to, if I'm not mistaken, the chillers that are actually in the 4 corners of the ice sheet. And when you take those out, that is meaning that the boards and the rink kind of have to be resized because of the way that the new chillers are going to go in and be placed. Now, the challenge with this is, number one, you're going to have some seating issues because you're taking 15 feet of ice and narrowing the sheet. And number two, Nick, what is one thing, especially a college like St. Cloud State who struggle with their football program, what is the biggest factor that is going to come into that decision of having to change the sheet when they have no choice?
It's money. 100%. There's no question that, and it's not new news to anybody. So, when I say this, this is not a knock, but the university is struggling with, and they're not the only one with, athletics funding. And at the end of it, with the additions to the Herbrooks National Hockey Center, especially the new performance center, and then also over at Hollenbeck with the new, weight room there, that's all been privately and donation funded. So at the end of it, the university doesn't have any loose change. And as you mentioned this type of project is not a cheap one. And it's one of those where you can't just fix the immediate problem or the acute problem for those in medical school. It's one of those where, if you dive into one thing, it's going to cause you to fix 3 or 4 other things. So it's not a simple answer. And it's one where that's why we've seen such a delay with trying to, almost wait until it sort of dies kind of thing, right? Because you're having to address, as we mentioned, the water table aspect on the foundation of the rink. You're also looking at, okay, well, if we have to shrink it, which I think honestly they should, because I do think we touched on this a couple episodes ago that, when you're trying to develop players for the NHL, yes, there's Olympic sheets, and I do think you should keep an Olympic practice rink as, a backup, but I think you should be playing an NHL sheet to give them more preparation for the next jump in the hockey levels. At the end of it, the Herb was built to be an Olympic sheet. And as you mentioned, there's seating problems that come with that. There's sightline issues. There's bench issues that come with that. So you're almost delaying it because when you change one thing, now it's like, now I got to change the whole freaking thing, right? It's like when you change or try to remodel your kitchen, you change out the appliances to black versus stainless steel. Now it's like, well, wait a second, this doesn't match. Now I got to change the countertops, and now I want to refinish the cabinets. It becomes a very big project, and I think the athletics department knows that. And I think at the end of it, I think they're trying to look for another solution as to how can we fix this. We've talked to some people actually know it, and I think it was Bill Prout that told us about some of the projects that were slated back in the early 2000s about that. I think it's the west side, almost blowing that whole thing open near the street side and making that more of like an open concourse. So, I mean, there has been some big plans, but, again, funding is the big thing. And at the end of it, I don't think anybody is, got pockets or the ability to even go to the state and say, we need money to fix the hockey rink. It's to me, the Huskies are kind of stuck with it. And they're going to have to probably be forced, unfortunately, to with it if and when just the chillers probably just burn out.
Yeah, and they've talked about they don't know if that's something that's going to happen in 2 or 3 years or something that will last them 7 or 8. But there is a timeline on it. Like it will happen. Like at some point it will happen. So you hope that the university is in a bit better position. And like you mentioned, they've wanted plans for bowl seating. It's like if you have to replace the chillers and the ice surface, that means that that concourse that kind of wraps around between the lower and upper seating of the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, that might get extended another 10 feet just to bring that lower bowl forward, if you will, and just kind of make it, closer to the ice and still keep those sight lines. That's going to be a project in and of itself. You have the sound system that needs to be redone, and kind of the game day theatrics, if you will. So, being able to kind of expand, on the ends of that arena, one, it's a challenge. And number two, I hate to say it, but unless they're playing North Dakota or Duluth, St. Cloud State just has not had the attendance, either that justifies that project as well. Back in the 2000s, in the heyday of the WCHA, absolutely. But, the Huskies, they got a tough task in their hands, that's for sure. 2 more questions about the Huskies here. And this one comes from our pal Derek Felska at Crease and Assist. Should the Huskies purchase the blanks from the Chicago reverse retro jerseys for the ultimate SCSU sweater? I'm going to go with no, just because I'm not a big fan of the Blackhawks ones. I mean, they're nice. They fit their thing, but I just don't think they're SCSU-esque, if you will. But Nick, I think the better question is, and I think we've had this discussion earlier, a fair amount earlier on the show. What could the Huskies do to kind of have some sort of like heritage or history-based uniform, but still kind of keep that tradition of, Huskies hockey?
We talked about this, when we had the jersey poll, if I remember correctly. And I'm actually going to pull up a picture because David Carlisle actually is wearing the jersey I like them to see. I don't know if people can see this, but
yeah, those are
that's
nice.
kind of the throwback to the old 60s. I think you can bring those back, and it's kind of the reverse retro. I mean, it's more of a throwback, and I think it looks really, really nice.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Nick is talking about the jerseys. They have the big black stripe, and then the 2 red stripes, and then it has the St. Cloud and the cursive lettering over the front. And I agree with you, Nick. I think it has to be something, even if it's not a Huskies true Huskies, vintage jersey. I think if you kind of do that vintage twist a little bit on it and kind of do something like that, it makes me think of, do you ever remember Bemidji State, # Mike Gibbons? Do you ever remember their uniforms back in like the mid 2010s, they used to have these kind of like cream colored uniforms. It was almost a spinoff of the New York Rangers, like Winter Classic style. And it was like cream. And then of course the green that they have there, and they made like a custom crest, the Bemidji crest. I don't know a whole lot about Bemidji's team history, so that might've been a thing, but they certainly look like a newer twist on kind of their own history as well.
Yeah. And I think that's what I would like to see, at the end of it. You want to go back, and kind of honor your heritage, especially through this program, which has been around for a while. And, obviously you want it to look nice. And so I don't know, to me, that would be my pick if I were to throw in, you would more affectionately call the alternate jersey, I think would be the better way to describe it. So that would be my pick.
I agree. All right. So the last serious St. Cloud State question, if you will, if Colorado College is forced to forfeit due to their COVID-19 outbreak, they're talking about next weekend in Grand Forks at the NCHC Frozen Faceoff, do they forfeit to the Huskies, or does the bracket get reseeded, giving North Dakota a bye, thus the Huskies playing with Miami? As we mentioned, right now in the top part of the bracket, it's North Dakota and Miami, and Omaha and Denver in the top part of that bracket, Western Michigan and Duluth, and St. Cloud State and Colorado College in the bottom half of that bracket. Nick, I think you have heard some rumblings if a scenario like that would happen, especially with the ability that Miami is actually would end up on the opposite side of St. Cloud State's bracket. Would it actually be a pretty simple thing to just move Miami down into that number 7/8 spot against the Huskies and give North Dakota that bye? Or do you see a full restructuring of that bracket?
So mind you, these are preliminary details that we're getting. So I'm just pulling up some of my notes. So thanks for bearing with me. Sure. But at this point, what we're hearing is not only CC, but because they were supposed to play Denver, we're also hearing that Denver is also possibly in that conversation with not traveling. So you could possibly have, as of yesterday, 2 teams not travel to North Dakota because of COVID outbreaks. Now, what we're hearing, and mind you, this is not set in stone, so please bear with us, would be that North Dakota and St. Cloud would get buys as the number 1 and number 2 seeds, and then I think the rest would get reshuffled is what it sounds like. But again, that's a very early thing. I know that Commissioner Josh Fenton had talked about some of those sort of scenarios if a team couldn't make it up to Grand Forks, how we would handle that. They talked about whether it was one team, would they let the one team that was supposed to play them just have advance to the next round? Should it be a seeding type thing, which what we're hearing, which is the top seed gets a bye or whatnot? So I think we're not going to know until very late, to be honest with you, Noah, because at the end of it, the conference wants every team, if they're able to try to join this, right? They want the teams to play. That's the way it should be. And I think at some point, maybe Wednesday, if not, I would say probably Thursday at the latest, we'd have to know. And at that point, I think the NCHC would have to, give us a scheduling update. I'm sure they're working on a couple different scenarios as we speak in preparation for that, but nothing official from the league as far as we know. But the rumblings we're hearing is that number 1 and number 2 to get buys if both those teams cannot make it.
Yeah, it's. I hope we don't come to that, because it'd be nice to at least just see every team. Really, the big day is Friday and Saturday. Just getting those teams out of the first round, because then it really kind of narrows things down. And I guess I don't know about Denver, but you kind of hope and expect that Colorado College is a team that gets bounced in the first round if you're a Huskies fan, right? So hopefully we don't have to deal with that issue. But if we do. Luckily for the Huskies and their gritty win yesterday, they put themselves in a really good spot to, be ready for that should that arise. And not a bad way to enter in the semifinal, although not playing in a week and a half before you face a team like Western Michigan or Duluth would be a real challenge. Nick, moving into NCHC talk here from our pal Derek Felska, who in the NCHC, a current undrafted player, is the most likely to get a real shot in the NHL someday and has a decent chance to be someone special? When I pulled up my list, and apologies if he's actually drafted, I don't think he is from what I looked. So I could be wrong here. Nick, I'm going to go with a goaltender, actually. I'm going to go with Ludwig Persson of Miami.
You stole mine.
Yeah, that's who I'm going with. And not just because he's had a good year, but when you have a freshman who's putting up good numbers, you think of a guy like David Renick and a Los Angeles Kings draft pick. And that's the guy that I kind of thought of right away on the fly. I would definitely believe, I would think, Nick, I'm imagining as I'm talking here, you're probably going to North Dakota's roster and seeing somebody who's got a fair number of points, or checking out the NCHC standings here. I mean, there are a lot of good players that can really make an impact. But I think Ludwig is a viable candidate because he almost makes you think of a guy like Hunter Shepard last year, who didn't actually have that offer, ended up signing, I believe, with Hershey in the AHL. So, that's a guy for me that I look, if he can continue his success, especially on a Miami team that, sorry, Miami Redhawks fans, has been god awful this year. If you're able to post those kind of numbers, imagine what he's able to do with a team in front of him that is a little more put together. I know Miami, they made some strides this year. Hopefully they can get back to form in the next season. But for me, he's the guy. Nick, I'm rambling on here to give you some time to try to find somebody here. You're welcome. While you're looking for that, Nick, I will answer a couple of questions from Caleb J. Peabody. Number one, his first question was, can you confirm if this phone belongs to Noah? It was a picture of a Jitterbug phone. Caleb, I actually have an iPhone 8. And I am slated to get an iPhone 11 pretty soon here. So hopefully I will never miss trivia ever again. Number two is, can you tell me who the biggest Micah Miller fan is, and also who runs his official fan account? Well, since you're a marketing guy, Caleb, you are the official fan account, but I'm going to go against you, Caleb, here. I'm going to say the biggest Micah Miller fan is probably Melissa Miller, considering the fact that she's, related to Micah and feeding him pizza all the time. So that would be my one here. Nick, how are we doing?
I'm just going to throw one out there,
Okay.
honestly, how about Easton Brodzinski? He's undrafted.
Who?
It's Easton Brodzinski.
Who?
Easton Brodzinski. Now, there's a caveat to that, obviously. I think for Easton, we all know his offensive production, right? We all know what he can do. He's a great shooter. He knows he can put the puck in that. In fact, he got the overtime winning goal yesterday. He's not a full-rounded player. To me, he still needs to develop a two-way game. But if he's able to do that, I think he could be a solid player. So to me, and at the end of it, I know he's had conversations with Boston and Los Angeles last year. So he was actually, getting offers even as early as last season to join the NHL. And then whether he is able to kind of break out of, I guess some of his tendencies, if you want to call it, is yet to be seen. But I do think Easton, if he's able to get a shot and, he gets into, I think, a coach like John Tortorella, Daryl Sutter, some of that is, going to be, kind of pushy with them. Like, hey, you're going to play this way. You're going to spend time on the bench. I think he has actually a really good shot to be a pro.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One of those tendencies I think that I would point out, being objective about this, and granted, Easton, great goal scorer. I think one of his natural abilities is to find that soft space in the ice. And when he gets a puck, he's a guy who might only get 2 or 3 shots a game, but he makes them count. He's a really good, and he's a guy who has the ability to be a power play specialist, especially maybe a half wall or a pivot guy in the middle of the ice. I think the biggest thing with Easton, like you mentioned, that needs to improve, skating, but not so much skating, just a little bit of compete. I think just seeing that full 60-minute effort and making sure that, he's engaged from the get-go. I mean, obviously he had the game winner last night in overtime. I think the biggest thing with Easton is when he's on, he's aggressive, he's on pucks, he's making plays. When he's off, he kind of disappears a little bit and isn't winning those pucks along the half wall or in the corners that are so vital to a guy of his size and his stature to be able to create those plays. So, but we believe in him, and I like that pick. I really do. And hopefully that, his showing both in the NCHC Frozen Faceoff and hopefully the NCAA tournament not only is good for himself, but he's a very vital piece of this Huskies offense and trying to get them rolling here. What do you got here, Nick?
Well, just to add on to that, the reason why Easton's my pick is you can't teach a natural goal scorer those types of skills. You just can't. And scouts know that. So you can, however, sort of push buttons to get people, as you mentioned, compete level, right positioning in the defensive zone, penalty kill. That stuff you can teach. You cannot teach a release. You cannot teach a player how to find those soft areas. That's very valuable to hockey scouts. And I think that's going to be the big reasons why he's had conversations in the past, and even more so after his senior season here. If he does not return to the Huskies, a big reason why he'll be having, I believe, additional conversations with NHL's clubs as well.
I agree. We've got about 5 or 6 questions left, some of them a little quicker, some of them a little bit longer. We got about 2 or 3 NHL questions. And the only question here, Nick, I think you're going to like this one in the college game here. This comes from @SCSU Puck Addict, and the word addict is capitalized, otherwise known as Mahoney. He's got some funny takes. I believe he does a podcast as well. But on a scale of Elephant Man to the Swamp Thing, how ugly is Bob Motzko in maroon and gold?
Oof. Well, you kind of pinned us on a corner there, didn't you?
Yes, he did. Here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say about this. Honestly, I think the thing that doesn't go in Bob Mosko's favor as far as the look behind the bench is the choice of face mask for COVID that he's got. The yellow that he's got going on there, because you got the big bright gold, in the maroon, maroon and gold M for Minnesota. But then his yellow is like this. It's this light lemon type thing that he's got on his face. And I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking, Bob, like, you make like $500,000 a year. Can't you get a face mask that like matches your?
You probably get that for free, honestly. So.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a team protocol thing. I would say,
it's part of the centennial season too, where they're doing like those yellow breezers too. Like, geez, like I think that's part of it. I don't think if they're not doing something different because they're celebrating their 100th season, you see that color behind the bench. Honestly,
I think we should give Bob Motzko some 100th anniversary yellow pants to wear on the bench. How good would that look? I think. I will say this though: the credit for the fact that we still got a Bob Motzko question is credit to the fact of how good of a coach he really is. And I think realistically how much St. Cloud State fans really miss him, and they should, because he is a heck of a hockey coach, obviously on the international and collegiate stage, helped build this program. So I think he's up in the swamp thing just because of the fact that the Huskies would like him in our swamp instead of the Minnesota swamp, if that makes sense. So,
and there's rumors that he could be visiting as a visiting head coach to the Herd, possibly as an exhibition game next season, early as that. There are a lot of talks about that, so we'll keep you guys updated about that.
And the question mark is, how many cheers and how many boos do we get? Is it going to be 60-40 or is it going to be 100-0? We'll have to find out, but it'll be interesting. Nonetheless, as much as you love him or hate him as a Huskies hockey fan, he is one heck of a coach, and it's difficult to see him go. But Brett Larson, a great guy. I actually have a trivia question about him today, and our trivia between you and I here. Nick, moving into let's go with some NHL things, because we only have a couple of those here. Minnesota Wild. This one comes from Caleb as well. Who should the Wild target to acquire before the trade deadline? Is there anyone you'd realistically think may fit in well with this group? This is an interesting question.
I do have one. And
a week ago, I think the answer might have been a little bit different with how well the Wild were rolling, but now I think it's a good topic for discussion.
I want to bring somebody back, and his name is Eric Haula as a center. And here's why I say that. This team, the current Minnesota Wild team, is fast. They are a much faster hockey team than they were even last season. Obviously, some personnel shifts, some guys coming in. A rookie might have something to do with that too. Unbelievable skater Kaprizov is, especially on his edges. It's unbelievable. He could literally teach a clinic with how well he skates. But to do that, you need somebody that comes in who can match that speed. And he's a guy that could be a really good depth piece, who is versatile. He can put him at center or the wing. And a guy that, to me, has got the capabilities of being a good hockey player. He had a good stint in Vegas. And I think if you get him with good enough talent, I think Eric Haula could be a good, sure depth piece going into the postseason. And to me, that would be the one guy I would target, because it looks like Nashville is about to blow themselves up here pretty soon with just not having the season that they're hoping for, especially with some of the contracts that they have. You might be seeing a yard sale coming out of Nashville over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, a fair amount of injuries in Nashville too, and almost nobody is safe. I mean, Philip Forsberg is on the trade block, which tells you something right there. I guess I don't really have a player in mind, but I think if I'm the Minnesota Wild, I'm actually going to go the other direction. I think that they maybe need maybe some winger help. And when I say that, just kind of maybe that middle six winger that's going to give you a little bit of production. He's not going to wow the world, but I think about it. The question mark becomes, how enamored are you with Nick Bjugstad's play, and how much do you think Victor Rask will continue to produce? I think if you have one or the other that's continuing to do that, I think then that changes that conversation, because Nick Bjugstad, even when he was with Minnesota as a Gopher, also Eric Haula, former Gopher as well, Bjugstad's kind of a streaky goal scorer. He has kind of those stretches where he has 2 or 3 games where he's lights out, and then, 2 or 3 games where he's kind of, not that he plays bad, but he's just not really producing or kind of getting on the score sheet. So for me, I wouldn't mind a winger. The other thing that might be important to think about, I know that you obviously have some good guys in the AHL, but maybe picking up I don't know, maybe a third goaltender, and just having a third goaltender on that taxi squad isn't the worst idea in the world if you're pushing closer to playoff time and believe that Minnesota is going to be a playoff team. Maybe just picking up kind of a cheap option to make sure that, in case of goaltender injury, you have somebody there. At worst, a practice goaltender. It's going to have to be someone who's older, maybe isn't getting, maybe isn't happy with their situation, just wants to change the scenery. But it's hard to sell that. But then again, the players don't really have.
You have that in Andrew Hammond.
Yeah, I suppose. But I guess,
so,
but again, what if you're not enamored with Andrew Hammond's play? What if you don't,
I don't think you have the choice, honestly, at this point, only because, and the reason why I picked up Erik Haula was because his cap hit is very small.
Yeah.
Right. Every team, the Wild are like 16th or 17th on the salary cap depth, and they're under $1 million in free cap space. So it goes to show you how tight everybody is. And it's very difficult in this specific trade deadline. I think it's going to be very, very quiet because essentially if you're going to have to make a trade, it's going to be money for money. It's not going to be those big trades you're going to see. It's like a Mark Stone going to Vegas for 3 draft picks and maybe a couple players. You have to match money for money with these trades just to get them to work for both teams in the salary cap. So to me, Erik Haula could be one of those guys where his cap hit is small enough and maybe you move a different piece out of the way if you're not happy with this play, like you mentioned, Nick Bukestad or somebody else. So, but to me, that would be the one guy you could acquire. But again, you're still up against the salary cap in this very particularly interesting season from the pandemic.
Yeah, and you also got to think about too, where are the Wild going to be at the trade deadline? You've got Bonino, you've got Johansson, you've got Bukestad, even Ian Cole. Maybe only 1 or 2 of those guys are coming back at best. So you got to think about, will the Wild be sellers at the trade deadline? We just don't know where they're going to be here. We got, I think, one more NHL question here and then a couple of quick ones. And then we do have to get rolling because we do have to hit your trivia here, Nick. This one comes from Derek Felska as well. Will we see the NHL back in Quebec again someday, or is it simply not meant to be? Nick, I think my first verdict is I'd love to see it. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. It's weird because they built a very nice arena out there to attract an NHL squad. The problem is, and the reason why the Nordiques left in the first place was the economy in Quebec City is not great. You forget a sports franchise. It's not just about the team, it's about the community, and can the community support it financially? And from even couple of years ago when Gary Bettman went up and took a look at the arena, he made it very clear that, hey, this arena is gorgeous, but there's still a lot of issues plaguing Quebec City that to me doesn't financially support a franchise. There's a big reason why, and that's part of the reason why the North Stars left too. They did the public option wasn't there to support a new stadium for the North Stars, the Met Center. So they flocked to Dallas where they're able to get some public funding. So you forget that the public economic impact is so important in these decisions. And right now, Quebec City just doesn't have it. Does that not mean that in the future it could? Maybe, but there's a lot of work to be done in that city specifically. And at the end of it, also now with 32 teams with Seattle coming into it, I don't know when the NHL is going to look to expand next, and if they do. So to me, it's going to be a while. And, if that does happen, I just don't see it in the near future at all.
All right. 3 more questions here for you, Nick. Caleb Peabody has all 3 of those. Shocker here. Number 1, what is Nick's favorite hiding spot at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, and why does he like to utilize it most during the Huskies warming house recaps to hockey games?
So that it's not a hiding spot, but it's in the television studios at Stewart Hall. That's where we tape those, just because I was producing behind the camera those intermission segments. So I was trying to help, some of my co-partners with some of the ideas, what to cover, some of the things hockey related wise to discuss, breaking down those intermissions. But then obviously last night I had the opportunity to finally do it myself on camera, which was a very, very fun opportunity. But down there, because I get to see all 16 cameras on one screen. And so if I miss a play, or if I want to go back and see something, I have the ability to call the replay and see something to help me break stuff down. So to me, that's my favorite spot to be, because I can see all 16 cameras going at once and I get the best angles for whatever just happens on the ice.
Yeah, I certainly enjoy being obviously up in the media deck. I would say the suites, mostly just because we don't really get to go up there a lot, but I always think it's cool being in a suite in a hockey rink. It's just kind of cool, especially the ones on the end, because you've got the big glass that overlooks the thing. How about being on the ice too?
on the ice, yes. I was able to film a couple of things this last weekend too on the ice, but I think also for you, Noah, I'm just going to flip this on you. How about the cafeteria? Because the cheesy bread was your favorite snack, either prior to the game or definitely intermission games. It was the garlic cheese bread that you just couldn't get enough of.
Oh yeah, I was a sucker for that. Have we ever told the marinara story on this? Remember when University of North Dakota came to town?
I don't think we have.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Caleb, you've inspired a very funny story here that I think all Huskies fans are going to love, because screw North Dakota, right? So if you know where the media deck is in the Herbert National Hockey Center, if you go down, if you're looking at the media deck, on the right-hand side is where usually KBSC and the radio, right next to Jim Erickson. We're kind of on that end, and there's that stairway that goes down into like the last concourse exit, not on the end, but the first one where like you can exit out the side, if that makes sense. And when you go down there, it's right next to the elevator is that little like the little food kiosk there. And they always have like the cheesy bread and the hot dogs there. So I was a sucker. I'd always get 2 cheesy bread, 2 hot dogs before every game, and like something to drink, right? So yeah, I was a sucker for that. But every time I would go in, yeah, it's bad they knew me by name and they knew what I was ordering. Like I would just walk up and they're like, okay, grab 2 cheesy bread, 2 hot dogs today. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, we've only had like 8 home games. So I go in there and I get my cheesy bread, and I always get marinara sauce with it, right? So I get marinara sauce. I eat my cheesy bread, and usually I get it. They usually open about an hour before game time, and I'll get it about 50 minutes before game time. So I have time to eat it, kind of digest it. And then, we'll get ready for the pregame and our prep. And what are we going to talk about in the pregame show? So I get done. We do our pregame show, and I don't know if it was like right before the national anthem or like somewhere around there. And I'm carrying my tray that has, the half marinara sauce thing. I'm carrying it to the garbage can, which the garbage can is about 10 feet to our left. And usually who else is to our left is usually the visiting like radio guys and like their media people or their stats people that are kind of over there. Well, they have all their cases of, like equipment, and like brand new equipment and stuff, and like all the UND like jackets hanging up on like the thing or whatever. Well, I was wearing a vest that day, and the coat hooks that are right next to the garbage can, I snagged it on my vest, and it caused my other arm to come through, and I sprayed marinara sauce all over the UND guys' equipment, all over their coats and that sort of thing. And I was just traumatized because I didn't have any napkins up there. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And so part of me is now I'm in a dilemma. I'm like, do I tell these guys, or do I go down to the kiosk, get some napkins, and try to handle it without saying anything? Because the thing is, do I believe that these guys are engaged enough that they're not going to notice that I just spilt marinara sauce all over their stuff, in the time that it takes me to go downstairs and come back? Or do I tell them? So me, being the kind-hearted St. Cloud State student that I am, and not a North Dakota University of North Dakota student, I go, hey guys, I just want to let you know I accidentally just spilled, marinara sauce on your guys' stuff. I'm going to grab some napkins. I'll clean it off. They gave me the nastiest look I think I've ever seen. And I'm just kind of like, well, I could have not told you at all. So whatever. I hope North Dakota loses to Miami in the first round. Anyway, moving on to our last couple of questions here. Caleb also asks, what is your go-to order at Taco John's? How much TJs are we ordering when the Huskies win the Natty this year? And how many brewskis and dooskies will we crush if the Huskies win the Natty? I'm not a big brewski dooski guy. I mean, I dabble. I'm a social drinker. I don't know. I suppose we'd probably get a little freaky with it, I guess, if the Huskies win the national championship. It'd be the first one, but they got to get there first. So that's where I'm a little skeptical. Nick, my go-to order at Taco John's is a number 5 with crispy chicken, large potato olays, and a medium Dr. Pepper. Do you know the Taco John's menu enough to know what you enjoy? No, not really.
No, not really. But potato olays, though, I mean, even those by itself is worth worth the price of admission.
Here's the challenge with potato olays: you can tell which Taco John's are good and which aren't, because some of them oversalt the potato olays, and that's a problem. You can't oversalt those suckers. All right, last question. It also has to deal with food. Nick, I pulled up the menu here because I couldn't remember. I kind of remember what I used to get. What is the best order at Val's? I want burger toppings and shake flavors included. This is a challenge. Yeah, exactly. I was like, Nick's not going to remember this. But for me, guys, I'm a fatty. I get a triple cheeseburger with bacon and cheese and everything on it. I get the full shebang, large fries, and for me, if I'm feeling normal, it's a strawberry shake. But as far as like the specialty shakes, when they come out with the pumpkin or like the cheesecake, like blueberry or strawberry cheesecake, that's what I'm going for. And I get a large in that too, because Val's, you can get that triple cheeseburger with everything on it, large fries, and a shake for like $10, and you will be stuffed. So
Yes.
that is my order at Val's, Caleb. Although I haven't had it in a long time, and I'm kind of sad and jealous now that I haven't had it. But Nick, 10:41 in the morning here for us, and we are going to bring back Huskies hat trick trivia. If I remember, I got 6 correct in the last one. I don't even know how, to be honest with you, but I don't know. I read these questions to somebody last night. They said they were really hard, so you might get like 2 of them. I have no idea.
We're going to try.
We're going to try and have some fun here to end the show. Huskies hat trick trivia. Nick has 15 seconds to answer the question. I'm going to give him however much time he needs, but I can guesstimate 15 seconds here. So here's an example of how the trivia goes here. I will ask a question, give 4 answers, and Nick has the opportunity to try to guess to see what he thinks is the correct answer. So Nick, the example question is, when was the only other time we had Huskies hat trick trivia on the show? May, June, July, or August of 2020?
May.
June 14th, 2020, and episode number 15 with Bill Prout.
Cool.
Yeah, long time ago. It's the only other time we've actually done the trivia. Okay, Nick Maxon, are you ready? We have one question about Brett Larson, Brett Larson, and a bunch about playoff and team records for the Huskies. No player questions for you this time. So, yeah, because you gave me all player questions last time, so I thought we'd switch it up. All right, number 1. Brett Larson, current St. Cloud State head coach, has won 2 national championships, both with the Duluth Bulldogs in 2011 and 2018. In his 3rd season with the Huskies, he looks to bring St. Cloud their first ever NCAA trophy. However, the former coach of the year has a bachelor's degree in what field? Kinesiology, criminology, business management, or political science?
Oh, I remember reading this too. Oh, son of a gun. Isn't it business management?
It is not. It is criminology. He left for professional hockey in 1995, but got his degree in criminology in 2004 from the University of Minnesota Duluth. Isn't that an interesting? When you look at Brett and you talk to him, that kind of fits the bill a little bit.
It makes sense.
Doesn't it though?
It does.
I was thinking about when I was listening to Brett do his like post game thing in last night's game. I kind of thought about like he has a really uncanny ability to calm people down. Like I swear I could be agitated and Brett would be like, "Hey man, you just got to take a deep breath." And I think I would calm down. I think he has a really good ability to kind of like take the temperature of the room and really assess the situation. He's got really good people skills. So criminology, I think he's able to pick out the people who don't have good social skills and are doing bad things like myself. So
ill-advised stuff, yes.
Definitely ill-advised. Number 2 here. St. Cloud played their 125th game against Duluth yesterday, winning 4-3 in overtime. How many meetings between St. Cloud State and Duluth have gone to overtime since they first met in 1946? 23, 26, 30, or 34?
Let's go with 30.
Nope, 26. That one was the only one that I would say is probably truly unfair, because how would you know? 26 is the correct answer. St. Cloud State has only lost 7 of those meetings. A lot of ties in the early days before they changed, obviously, the rules. Nick, random question. How many games between St. Cloud and Duluth have gone to overtime this year?
Isn't it their 4th one?
3. I think it's 3.
Anyway. I was going to say 3 or 4th.
I think it's 3 anyway. I could be wrong on that. I thought it was 3 when I looked. Anyway. All right, Nick, 0 for 2. I think those are probably the 2 toughest ones that you're going to get all day, but we'll see. All right, number 3. There are currently 8 teams in the NCHC, in case you didn't know. St. Cloud played its first future NCHC opponent, Minnesota Duluth, in 1946, followed by North Dakota in an 8-1 win in January of 1947. Which current NCHC team was the last team the Huskies played for the first time?
Ooh.
Miami, Colorado College, Nebraska, Omaha, or Western Michigan?
Ooh. Western Michigan?
Western Michigan is correct. December 29th of 2011. Miami, Ohio, 1987. Colorado College, 1989. Nebraska, Omaha, 1998. Kudos to you on that one. Isn't it kind of wild to think that like 2 years before the NCHC was there, I guess that they were, I mean, I suppose that their program was kind of, doing
that was kind of my thought. Yeah. It was kind of an up and coming program.
Exactly. I figure that's one, if you kind of like put your noggin together, you might have just got it just kind of thinking about that. So congratulations, Nick. That's one on the board for you. I'm going to write down that you have one on the board because I'm sure I'll forget in a minute here.
No goose egg. That's good.
Yeah, better than nothing. Number 4, St. Cloud State has played 16 exhibition opponents in its history and was set to play Guelph again for the first time since 1990 this season. In 32 exhibition games, St. Cloud State has tied 2 of those. But how many exhibition games has St. Cloud State lost? 2, 3, 5, or 6?
3.
No, 5. They have lost. Yeah, that was a tough one too. I was reading through these last night. I'm like, I think I kind of screwed them over a little bit here. Anyway, 5 is correct. A little bit of team history for you. 5 is correct. 2 against the University of Alberta. 1 against Manitoba, and 2, this is the one that probably got you, 2 against the U.S. under-18 team. Don't forget So there's a team. The ties came against Western Ontario in 1990 and the U18 team. So that's the one that I think kind of throws people off, as they think, well, the exhibition game at the beginning of the year, they should hopefully win most of them. Well, don't forget the U18 teams against, like, in the Christmas tournaments sometimes. Number 5 here, Nick. Throwing it back to the old WCHA, during the WCHA playoff first round series only, not the final 5, which team did St. Cloud State have the most wins against in all-time playoff meetings? Minnesota Duluth, University of Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Alaska Anchorage?
Ooh. It's not Anchorage. Team that have to get there. Is it Minnesota?
It is not Minnesota. It is the University of Minnesota Duluth.
Oh.
11 wins against the Bulldogs, 6 losses. They are 3-9 against the U of M, 7-4 against Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
And 4-0 against Alaska Anchorage. So probably the best, I would say, winning percentage against Alaska Anchorage, but the most wins against Duluth. Kind of crazy to think that they played 17 times. Like, it's a lot of hockey. Number 6 here, Nick. Since the inception of the NCHC, St. Cloud State, in both the first round and the Frozen Face-Off combined, okay, so all playoffs, has a combined losing record against how many teams? 0, 1, 2, or 3?
So NCHC and NCAAs?
No. So the first round, so like the play-in rounds, the best of 3 play-in rounds.
Okay.
Plus the Frozen Face-Off. So like their record in both of those. So like their record against North Dakota in both of those scenarios combined.
Got it.
So do you want me to read it?
North Dakota would be 1.
Do you want me to read it again?
No, I got it.
Okay.
0, 1, 2, or 3, right?
Correct.
I'm gonna go with 2.
This one might shock you. 0.
What?
They are 13-8 overall, 8-5 in the first round, and 5-3 in the Frozen Face-Off. The only team St. Cloud State has a losing record in the first round against is UND. They are 0-2, but they are 2-0 against them in the Frozen Face-Off. And the only team with a losing record in the Frozen Face-Off that the Huskies have against is Miami. They're 0-1 against them. So unless the record book is wrong, I have 0 in that, which isn't that interesting? To think that
that's very interesting.
Yeah. So we got a lot of Frozen Face-Off questions here. I think I have 2 more of those. Number 7, this will be the 7th year of the NCHC Frozen Face-Off, excluding 2020 and this season. How many times have the Huskies qualified for the tournament in the 6 other seasons it has been held? 3, 4, 5, or all 6?
7, 5.
Close. 4. Hopefully, technically it'd be 5 if it was this year, but 4, 2015, 2016, 2018, and 2019. So a lot in pretty recent memory. So number 8, in those 4 seasons in which the Huskies made the Frozen Faceoff, how many finals did they appear in? 1, 2, 3, or 4?
2013, 18. Would have been 3, right?
4. They have appeared in all 4.
Oh.
They've only won it once, though, in 2016 over Duluth. So kind of interesting, right? So 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019, they've appeared in the final in all of them. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, besides that win in 2016, all of the other finals that they've lost have been 1-goal contests, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah.
Huskies have been in it for sure. The Huskies, this is a difficult one, I can tell, because I mean it's hard because it's like you can't really rely on like players and that sort of thing. Team records,
because the other ones have been easy. Got it.
No, I'm just saying, like, in general, I think this is difficult. The Huskies are hoping to make the NCAA Division I tournament this year. When was the first year that the Huskies made a regional tournament? 1987, 1989, 1995, or 2000?
95.
1989, they lost to Lake Superior State. They have made 14 tournament appearances. That 1989 tournament, that regional, is the only regional that the Huskies have played in that was a best of 3, actually, before they rechanged the format there. I didn't expect you to know that one. I will say all of these, though, are within probably a space of about 4 pages in the record book. Yeah, so F you, Nick. I'm just kidding.
Pretty much.
The last question for you here. When was the first time St. Cloud State won a NCAA regional tournament game? 2000, 2003, 2010, or 2013?
13, right?
2010, actually. 2013 was the second time they did. 2010, they beat Northern Michigan University in double overtime in St. Paul. St. Cloud has won the first game of the regional tournament in 4 of their last 7 tournament appearances, making it to the Frozen Four once in 2013. I would say, honestly, obviously we know how the recent regionals have gone, but St. Cloud, especially kind of in that 2000s era, has really had some really good success. I would say that people don't realize that, especially, Frozen Faceoffs in the NCAA tournament, St. Cloud has done a good job of, getting out of that first round and having a good playoff tournament. They just haven't found a way to, continue to kind of get over that piece of that. Nick, on a scale of 1 to ridiculousness, how ridiculous was that?
It was pretty ridiculous, but that's all right.
Yeah,
it's fun.
I felt like it was pretty ridiculous. I'm going to have to think of like an extra trivia one to give you a little bit of a chance there. Nick, do you know what your final score was?
It was 1-9.
You're 1-9. I don't know. I was kind of thinking about what could we do that is going to promote a little bit about St. Cloud State and their playoff history as we move into tournament time here. But team records, I think, are a very difficult thing. So I didn't really give you a chance at all there. But we'll have to do another one. Nick, what do you want to do for a trivia topic where I can give you a chance? What is something you think you would know well, like Minnesota Wild history, Minnesota Twins history, something for the summer?
Wild or NHL history, yeah.
We could do that. Maybe give you a better chance and have somebody proofread my questions. But Nick, one other thing we do have to get you. Normally, this is the day where we do our double minor giveaway. We're gonna put that on the back burner for a little bit, just because of kind of our T-shirt ordering and that sort of thing at the current point in time, and just because, 1, this was a very hefty episode, but 2, we also have a lot going on with the playoffs and that sort of thing. Nick, do we have anything else that we need to address here before we say sayonara for this episode?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, Huskies Warming House podcast fans, thanks again for joining us for a riveting episode in which I just made Nick feel terrible about the rest of his day here. That will do it for episode number 52. Don't forget, St. Cloud State is back in action, at least as far as we know right now, for game number 1 of the quarterfinals of the Frozen Faceoff in Grand Forks at 2:37 p.m. Central Time. And from there, I guess we're going to find out where they go, as we'll have a showtime before the next game of that tournament. So sayonara from the Huskies Warming House podcast and episode number 52.